chess.com to make this new series on how to beat a Grandmaster. It's a small series, only 4 short videos of 15 minutes each, so needless to say that I cannot really teach you completely how to, in just 1 hour, I cannot teach you how to beat a GM for sure in the next game. So what I can do is to give you concrete examples of things, of the way you should think in order to try to beat a Grandmaster. That's what I did when I decided on my games selection. So I decided to use my own game, and rather than trying to explain you how to beat a GM, which is a very, very wide subject. I mean, it's about tactics, strategy, opening, endgames, everything. I mean, it covers everything. So I decided to use my own games, to use 4 of my victories against Grandmasters, 1 in the opening, 1 in the middle game, 1 in the end game, and 1 in bad situations, so how to overcome a bad situation. And I'm going to try to explain you what were my thoughts and the way I was thinking during these games. So perhaps you can reproduce it yourself and beat Grandmasters. I think that the best thing I can do in 4 times 15 minutes. And I really hope that following these videos, you're going to beat a Grandmaster pretty soon. Anyway, let's start. We start with the first game. It was my victory against Razantsev in 2012. It was the last round of the French League, and he was the first player above 2,700 ELO that I beat, so I was very happy that I played the Grunfeld, and he played Bishop D2, which was very fashionable at the time. Then it became a little bit not forgotten, but let's say that people were playing other things. And lately, it became popular again. For example, Giri played it against Vashiragrav, perhaps even more than 1 game. Anand beat Nepomniachtchi in just like 15 moves with a strong novelty. Nepomniachtchi blundered and Anand won. So this line is becoming popular again. What is the idea behind this move, Bishop D2? After Bishop G7, E4, Knight C3, which is the way, well, you can also play Knight B6 here, then White would just lose 1 tempo with his Bishop, he would play Bishop D3. But the idea is to capture with a Bishop. It might look like White has lost quite a lot of time to bring his Bishop to C3, why not to just take with the pawn? But actually, when you reach that position a few moves later, you realize that, well, it is true that White is a little bit underdeveloped since Black already has castled, and that White is quite far away from castling because, well, let's be fair, he's not going to castle on the queen side when he has no B pawn. Is rather, well, or not going to castle as it happened in the game I'm going to show you, or to castle short side as it happens in most of the games. So we can definitely say that Black, although he has no developed piece except his king, except that castle has been played, we can say that there is a lead of development for Black. Anyway, I was trying to figure out what to play with Black, and I realized that my computer, which was not very strong at the time, it was extremely weak compared to a normal computer, and compared to, well, cloud engines now, for example, well, it was, you can imagine that it would score 0% against current engines. But anyway, I played Queen D6 because my engine was suggesting it. F4, Knight D7, E5, and Queen C7. That looks a little bit weird because, well, F4 and E5 looks quite strong for White, and Black has just moved his queen to D6 and then to C7. We usually say that the queen should not be the first piece to be developed, so this is a little bit against the rules. But here Black has an idea, which is to play C4, Knight B6, and Rook D8 and find counterplay on the D pawn. And don't forget that the king is still on E1, far away from castling, so there is an idea behind this with Black. Well, for example, C4, which would look like a positional crusher, because it would prevent c4 from black, there would be knight takes e5. And of course, the knight is not possible to take because of queen e5 and queen a1. So basically the way I was thinking when I was preparing, so my first reaction was, no, I'm not going to play that because it doesn't look good for black. But then I thought, look, the white moves are very obvious up to now, and here it looks to me like a very obvious move when you see all the black pieces on the queen side. It seemed to me like a very obvious move is h4. And I started to analyze it a little bit, and first of all I thought that my opponent is definitely going to play it because it looks extremely logical in that situation to attack the black king. And I realized that actually the computer has a point, and he really thinks that the black position is playable. So I thought, actually, I'm playing against a stronger opponent. I would be happy to win that game. So I'm going to try to trick him. I'm going to try to tell him, like, come to me, attack me. I'm going to take a little bit of time to pretend that I'm not necessarily prepared. And actually, I will know everything because, well, I'm preparing it before the game with my own computer. Even though it is not such a good computer, it is still quite good compared to a human, of course. So h4 is definitely the move I expected. c4 is what the engine wanted to play. h5, knight b6, knight f3 is also very obvious. hd6 would be possible first. fg, of course, not hg opening the h file. I mean, there would not be f5 because of the e5 pawn hanging, but just queen f2, queen h4. Of course, I would take with the f pawn. It is not very nice positionally, but now we are really talking about dynamic chess, so I want to put my bishop here or there, and then the rook to d8, and d5 is a serious weakness actually, and my pawn on c4 is very, very annoying. White would dream to have a pawn on c4 instead of mine. Anyway, knight f3 first looked to me like the most logical move. Bishop g4, this is what the engine considered as the almost only move. Pawn takes, so for the same reason as before, I'm not taking with that pawn. So f5 might be a little bit early because there would be bishop f3 and maybe then queen takes e5 and my queen would come back. But for example, something like that, and then queen h6, that looks to me like disaster for black. So obviously I took with the f pawn. If I remember well, because that was 8 years ago, I also checked the move rook h4 here, which was quite interesting with the idea to bring the queen to h2. It was about equal with precise play, but I had checked it only very briefly because I had little time to prepare for the game, and I actually believed that pawn takes g6 and knight g5, which happened in the game, was what any strong player would play. Knight g5, so attacking the h7 pawn, which you don't really want to move because then, let's say, bishop e2. If that bishop disappears, look, there will be knight e6, there will be g4. G6 is also weak. This is really not something I want. So here, actually, he's attacking me on the king side. I have to answer in the center, although it looks very dangerous. d6, that is the right move. That was played by my opponent. We are still in my preparation. Knight h7 would not be great. For example, rook d5, and now there would be many good moves, but rook f4 would just be a crusher. Queen takes, rook e5, and then I would collect the white queen, and I have many extra pawns. So d6 is actually the only move, but also a very dangerous one, since after ed6, rook h7, well, my king looks very weak and my queen is hanging, so I have to be quite careful here. However, I knew how to continue because the engine had showed it for me. I mean, if I had that position over the board and just playing by myself, I would probably think, wow, I'm in a real danger here. But I was quite confident because I had prepared it just before the game. So queen c5. My opponent here played their best move, rook h6. I took on e5, rook g6, king h8, And here I knew that there is a way to make a draw for white, which is to find the great move f5. Rook takes queen, and now it's just a perpetual check. And f5 is actually not the only move to make a draw, because you have several ways to make it work, as I'm gonna show. But that's the only drawing idea. Otherwise, white is just lost. So that means unless something was missed earlier, my preparation was correct and good. So f5, and I cannot take the pawn because then there will be knight f7 and rook f7, queen takes d8. That's not something I want. Instead, knight f7 check was played by my opponent, king h7, and he was still in time here to play f5, threatening mate, and if I take the queen, then he can come back to g5 and then give a draw. That was the last moment for him to save the game, since after he played rook h6 check and took on d8, which at first might look very clever, because if I take the rook, then f5 check, covering the diagonal of the bishop, and knight e6, and I'm just lost. However, here I can just take rook d8, and the rook is not hanging because of queen e3 and queen e2 mate on the next move. There is also no good queen move. I mean, if you just exchange rooks, suddenly the rook on h6 is hanging, so that's a win for black. My opponent went for rook h4, but I took the free queen. Well, not exactly free, because there are two rooks, but I'm too dynamic here, and the position is just dead lost for white in many ways. And after c3, of course c2 is coming, or queen d2 and c2, and my opponent resigned. So I was very happy with that victory, although I really felt like it was actually my laptop's victory, not my victory, but that's a way to beat a grandmaster, what to do. And it reminds me of a story of something Etienne Bacrot told me a couple of months after that game. He was playing himself against an experienced, I don't remember who the player was, or maybe I do, but anyway, we don't need to quote the guy. I mean, some experienced Grunfeld player, 2650, and Etienne was white, and he was prepared in that Grunfeld with a very strong computer, which he had. It was his own computer, but he knew that his opponent was preparing with a much worse computer than the computer Etienne had himself. So he told me that in order to prepare and to guess the move that his opponent was gonna play, he actually switched off his strong engine, and he used his weaker computer to see what it is suggesting from the black side. And then he used his strong computer to refute these moves. But in order to guess the move that his opponent was probably going to play, he used, to quote his words, he said in French, it's difficult to translate it perfectly, but he said, I used his computer, like saying, I took his computer, I took a similar computer to his just to see what he was going to play, and then once I could guess what he was going to do, I refuted his lines with my own computer. So guess what? You can sometimes beat a GM in the opening if you choose a tricky position, and if you manage to guess a little bit what he is going to do, and that can sometimes happen in very forcing lines like this one, f4, e5, h4, h5, and so on. And if you are better prepared, sometimes that can bring you a free point, because that's almost a free point I got against Razantsev. That's not something you can get very often. So if you have such ideas when preparing for a game, go for it and try to trick your opponent, because that might definitely bring you a point. So I hope you enjoyed the game, and see you soon for the second video.